when I hear people talk about freedom, there seems to be two different general ideas. Freedom from something and freedom to do something. It reminds me of my days in information technology, when people described free open source software as free speech, not free beer. Now, when we talk about freedom today, are we talking about free speech or free beer? It's a topic we'll discuss next on the Constitution Study.
Neighbors and have a few good friends. Every day we're everyday Americans. Oh, every day we're everyday Americans.
Hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel here with the Constitution Study, where we read and study the Constitution, teach the rising generation to be free. Guess what? This is my 500th episode on the Constitution Study. 500 articles, 500 videos and audio podcasts. To me, that's a pretty important milestone. I'm glad you've come to join me. Now, I'll talk more about the website and ways you can support the work that we're doing at the end of the episode. But for now, let's talk about this question of free speech or free beer. As Americans, we often talk about freedom. We talk about freedom of speech, being free from unreasonable searches, even the freedom to vote in elections. But have you ever really considered what it means to have freedom? The dictionary defines freedom as the condition of not being controlled by another nation or political power, political independence, the condition of not being subject to a despotic or oppressive power, civil liberty, the condition of not being constrained or restricted in a specific aspect of life by a government or other power, freedom of assembly, and the condition of not being a slave. The Bill of Rights was written to ensure that the rights that protect our freedoms were included in the supreme law of the land. People often talk about rights as if they are monolithic things, all lumped together. But there are several ways to differentiate rights. The Declaration of Independence lists some unalienable rights, which would lead one to believe there are also alienable rights. There are rights protected by the Constitution of the United States, while others exist even if they are not enumerated, as the Ninth Amendment points out. The enumeration in this Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. In today's society, there are even rights claimed that are not legitimate rights at all. Even freedom of speech has limits, as Benjamin Franklin, writing under the pseudonym Silas Nugent, stated. Without freedom of thought, there can be no such thing as wisdom, and no such thing as public liberty without freedom of speech, which is the right of every man as far as by it he does not hurt or control the right of another. And this is the only check it ought to suffer, and only bounds it ought to know. So even the freedom of speech is limited to those actions that do not hurt or control the rights of another. Now, after the alienability of a right, the most important aspect I can think of, and the one I will be focusing on today, is the question of whether a right is positive or negative. This topic can be a bit confusing because we normally associate positive with good and negative with bad. That's not the case here, since positive and negative refer to the duty of others. So let's start by looking at these two different types of rights. Negative rights are those things which cannot be done to you. Look at the Bill of Rights, and most of the rights you'll see are negative. Your right to not have a national church or be prevented from practicing your religion as you see fit. Your right to not have your speech, press, or liberty abridged. Your right not to be unreasonably searched or seized. Now, not all the rights protected by the first 10 amendments of the Constitution are negative, but the vast majority are. Now, it seems a little counterintuitive, but negative rights are some of the best and most powerful ones to be protected. This is because negative rights do not give you power. Rather, they prohibit others from exercising power over you. That's not to say someone can take a negative right too far, but I'll talk about that later. Right now, let's look at positive rights. While negative rights are those things which cannot be done to you, positive rights are those that place a duty on others. Your right to a jury trial places a duty on other Americans to serve on a jury. Similarly, your right to counsel in criminal cases places a duty on the American taxpayer to pay someone to represent you. And don't forget that someone has to pay for the judges, the courthouses, and other employees in our justice system. Even your right to vote places a burden on others, since someone has to pay to put on an election. But since positive rights place burdens on others, They need to be both narrowly tailored and necessary to protect the other rights of the individual. Take, for example, your right to trial. Under the Sixth Amendment, we read, "In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed." Why is your right to trial important enough to warrant placing not only the burden of serving on a jury, but the cost of the trial on your fellow Americans? The answer is simple. Imagine you are the accused. Do you want a judge, a government employee, deciding your guilt or innocence? Don't you want a chance to tell your side of the story? Don't you want this done in public, not behind closed doors? Yes, the cost of maintaining a judicial system can be expensive. And yes, serving on a jury can be a hardship. In the end, though, who do you want determining your guilt or innocence? Some government actor or a group of fellow citizens? If that is what you want for yourself, shouldn't you be willing to help provide that for others? Now, just because someone claims a right doesn't mean it's a legitimate right. Let's go back to the quote from Benjamin Franklin, which is the right of every man as far by it he does not hurt or control the right of another. And this is the only check it ought to suffer and the only bounds it ought to know. Your ability to exercise your right should be restricted to not hurting or controlling the right of another. According to Mr. Franklin, that is the only boundary your right to free speech should know. Take, for example, the infamous yelling fire in a crowded theater. The Supreme Court never said you didn't have the right to yell fire in a crowded theater, only that the First Amendment wouldn't protect you from falsely doing so. By falsely yelling fire in a crowded theater, you deprive the attendees of their right to attend the event, the performers from doing their jobs, and the owner from operating the theater. Now, we frequently see the same thing on college campuses when a group claims to use freedom of speech to deny freedom of speech to others. That is an illegitimate use of freedom of speech. But what about other rights, especially the positive ones? So if a right, positive or negative, cannot be legitimately used to hurt or control the rights of another, how do we deal with the flurry of rights that have been claimed over the years? During the 19th century, people claimed a right to own slaves. This claimed right was supported by both federal law, the Fugitive Slave Act, and the Supreme Court in Prigg versus Pennsylvania. This right clearly hurt and controlled the rights of slaves in America under the claim that they were not persons under the Fifth Amendment. Today, we hear claims of all sorts of positive rights, from health care to housing, from transgender to zoning. We see people claiming the right to tell you how things should be done. It's one thing when the people or states get together and agree that certain things like trials and juries are important enough to place a burden on the people. That is the consent of the governed. However, when an individual or group claimed the right to tell other people how to speak, who they must do business with, and what they are allowed to believe, that is not the consent of the governed, but the tyranny of false rights. And no, government does not have the legitimate authority to tell you to accept their decrees simply because they say so. According to the Declaration of Independence, their only legitimate authority comes from us. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. We, the people, consent to a government's power when it is formed by a constitution. Any power exercised beyond those delegated to the government are illegitimate and illegal. From the case Norton v. Shelby County, an unconstitutional act is not a law. It confers no rights, it imposes no duties, it affords no protection, it creates no office. It is in legal contemplation as inoperative as though it had never been passed. So when governments pass laws placing a burden on you because of some alleged right someone else possesses, if that power was not delegated to them by the Constitution, the act is void. In my view, it's because it was a power not given to government by the consent of the governed. Now, rights are powerful and important things. So when the term is used either recklessly or in an attempt to elevate a person's argument without a legitimate cause, it diminishes the value of rights across the board. So when people claim they have a right to speak over you, freedom of speech is diminished. When government tells you what you can do with your property rights are diminished. When people claim a right to education, healthcare, or any other commodity, your right to yourself, your liberty, and of course your property rights are destroyed. Even the right to keep and bear arms becomes abusive when it deprives someone of their right to control their property. When dealing with rights, the first question we should ask should be, is the right legitimate? Does it hurt or control the rights of another? Is it demanding of the people a duty or obligation they did not consent to? Because far too often, the claims of rights and freedoms are less about protecting the rights of the individual and more about getting someone else to pay for what they want. So ask yourself if this freedom they're talking about is more like free speech or free beer. Again, freedom is one of those words that's used frequently, but frequently not really well defined. And this distinction between free speech, your ability to exercise something, to do something, and free beer, which is getting something at someone else's expense, is important. It's the distinction between negative rights and positive rights, and it's the understanding of that distinction and their limitations on both that's important to being the land of the free. We have to be brave enough to both stand up for our rights and protect the rights of others. Now, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you head to the website, constitutionstudy.com. If you look up the article, you can find all the links to all my sources so you can double check my work. You can also head by the store and maybe pick up a book or a mug or just donate to the cause. Nobody here takes a salary. Nobody's making money off of this. So anything you can do to help would be greatly appreciated. That includes using your cell phone. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. And I joined them years ago, not because of that, but because they take a portion of every dollar and support organizations that are protecting your rights, including, by the way, the Constitution Study. So if you go to patriotmobile.com/constitution and sign up for a plan, guess what? When you pay your cell phone bill, you're helping to support the Constitution Study. Don't forget, you can get your line activated absolutely free if you use the code Constitution at checkout. Just a little extra freebie to sweeten the pot. So again, please go to patriotmobile.com/constitution, find a plan that works for you, see if you're eligible for a discount, and then don't forget to use the code Constitution at checkout to get your line activated absolutely free and support the work we're doing here at the Constitution Study with your cell phone. Most of all, I hope you'll share this episode and share the work that we're doing. I hope these 500 episodes lead to at least 500 more. That only works if you come back and join us here next time for the Constitution Study.
Love your neighbors and have a few good friends. Every day